chapter 13 of Canto 1. Dhṛtarāṣṭra quits home. We're going to take in verse number 5. I'll also be referring to the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapters 1 and 3. So without further ado, we can start. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Patiyagmu Pahashrena Pranam Tanva Ivagatam Abhisangamya Vidhivat Parisvanga Vidvadanai. Prati, towards, Ujigamu, went, Prahashrena, with great delight. Pranam, life. Tanva, of the body. Eva, like, āgataṁ, returned. Abhisangamya, approaching. Vidvavit, in due form. Patishvaraga, embracing, and abhivadanai, by obeisances. And the translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. With great delight, they all approached him as if life had returned to their bodies. They exchanged obeisances and welcomed each other with embraces. In the absence of consciousness, the limbs of the body remain inactive. But when consciousness returns, the limbs and senses become active. And existence itself becomes delightful. Vidura was so dear to the members of the core of a family that his long absence from the palace was comparable to inactivity. All of them were feeling acute separation from Vidura, and therefore his return to the palace was joyful for all. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapatamyena Bhutale Swayam Rupati Gadamayam Tatati Svabadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Bidai Krishna Bistai Bhutale Shimali Satsrutasko Swami Nityanamani Nama Om Vishnu Bidai Krishna Bistai Bhutale Shimali Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvashesha Shanyavadi Paschatade Shatarine. Hare Krishna. So it is a very interesting part of the Bhagavatam. We're talking about a personality called Vidura. Vidura was a family member of the Kurus, and he was there during the time when Lord Krishna was present. He was there mainly as an uncle of the Pandava brothers. All 5 Pandavas were very affectionate to Vidura, and Vidura was most affectionate to the Pandavas. He was not most affectionate to Duryodhana and company, the other Kurus, the cousins of the Pandavas. In fact, we're talking about a time when Dhṛtarāṣṭra quits home. We're talking about a time when Vidura returns. But on his departure, it was a very acrimonious departure. He very much was against his elder brother's rule and the way he ruled. And specifically because his elder brother Dhṛtarāṣṭra was under the influence of his son Duryodhana, who happened to be a very personification of evil in one place. That's the way he's put. Dhṛtarāṣṭra is definitely presented as a very faulty character who made massive mistakes in the rule of the world. He was the world leader at the time, and he made massive mistakes because of his inclination or his patrimony. What do they call that? Oh, I can't remember the word. It's where you favour your family members most, and to the detriment of proper law and order. it said that a king should punish his own family members if they were wrong, and forgive his enemies, and appreciate his enemies if they are right. Not that because he's my relative, therefore everything he does is okay with me. That's not a way a king, according to the Vedic understanding. And as I mentioned before in some other classes, the Vedic understanding is a very high ideal standard. It was based on the main principle that this world is a temporary situation given to us as living entities to try to rectify our inappropriate activity, behavior, understanding from the spiritual perspective, and so that we can actually return back to the spiritual realm. So do we do that? Unfortunately, a lot of the time we don't. And that's why we're in this, that's why we have this material world. And that's why this material world at present is a very, very dangerous place, a very unwholesome place to be. I don't need to give too many examples of that. I think most people can experience it themselves if they're in any way alert to the life situations. So the Vedic society had that as a ground rule, and the essence of what the material world is about, and the essence of why we're here and how we can leave this place. So, as I said, it's a high society, and their social structures were based on that as well. That you live properly in this life so that you can leave it to go back to the spiritual dimension. There's no doubt about it. You know, it's not like John Lennon's song, "Imagine there's no heaven." You know, he's trying to imagine some sort of fictitious world that he's created. It's a kind of like a utopian ideal. And but that's not what it is. And I mean, I'm nothing against John Lennon. I actually quite appreciated a lot of his songs and whatever. But imagine there's no whatever, and then you're shot, you know, at 40 years old, at probably the height of your creativity. That's the material world. That's the harsh lesson of the material world, which we all have to undergo. Imagine there's no disease. Well, you know, there's coronavirus, or imagine there's, you know, everything is wonderful and people are all kind and generous and whatever. No. I was at a conference, a Zoom conference last night, and it was based, a lot of the members are members of the growing fraternity, that they grow natural foods in their own locations to share with their own community members. It's a method of trying to redress the whole balance of that. You buy your bananas from Guatemala, your avocados from Israel, you get what I'm saying? It's like the whole package of the material world that's been presented to us has, according to their understanding, it's going to collapse quite soon. And if it does, what are you going to do for food? I also mentioned recently about what we're presented when we come to this world as being ideal. We're presented with a semi-D or a detached house in a suburb, or not even in the suburb. If you can't get a suburb now, the next idea is that you're going to go higher up. You're going to a high-rise flat. I was on the 35th floor in one apartment in Chicago, and it's weird. You know, it's really weird. That was my understanding. I mean, you're 35 stories up. You have to pop down to the ground floor with an elevator, and then you go out and you buy your food in the shop. You know, that's all nicely packaged, and you bring it back up, and then you put it in your cooker and your microwave, you know, from your electricity. it's been packaged that way for us to think that this is the ideal life. Oh, I've got an apartment in the 45th story of New York. I have nothing against New York per se, but I was so unimpressed with the place. I'm that's maybe just my personal opinion, but from the way everybody was talking about it, it's a run-down place. It reminded me of Calcutta, and Calcutta was a jewel in the British crown, but has subsequently degenerated. So all these big cities, they're promising so much, and jobs and money and so-called enjoyment, but it gives so little. So that's the material world. That's what the material world is presenting to us as being ideal. So the Bhagavatam doesn't, and the Vedic society doesn't start off from that. In fact, it has a culture which tries to elevate the personality, but at the same time tries to give a decent standard of life. Also gives a decent standard of morality, a decent standard of political leadership. All of these things were all dealt with, but it was based on the idea that the king was an ideal king and was able to rule properly. So Vidura, the person who's being spoken about here, was he wasn't a king, but he was the advisor to the crown, and his advice unfortunately wasn't taken, and the king became corrupt. So now this advisor is now coming back after the corrupt kingdom has been eliminated, and he's very much, people really, really want him back. They really, really are over the moon that he's back, because these personalities bring with them great power, energy for the good. As souls living in this world, we also have to be like that, because otherwise we will be confusing the situation more with our own confusion. So as souls, as persons here in this world at this time, we're all being called to action, and it's not so easy to have a proper effect in this world, to have a positive effect in this world, because we can easily throw in our confusion, our anartas, it's called unwanted things, or lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, envy. We can bring that into the world, and it confuses, and it creates problems everywhere. So we have to be extremely careful of removing our thing from the world. That was something I remember reading in Jungian philosophy, that if we can actually remove our projection, our illusory projection on the world, it's called the false ego, we call it in Sanskrit, that will be a great benefit to the world, because we don't even understand from the philosophical point of view, what is this word? No, not āgataṁ, it's the Toja, that's 1042 in Bhagavad Gita. It is, why can't I remember this verse? Bahunam vidadati kalman. That basically the idea is that Krishna is the center, and we're all parts of Krishna, and he gives energy to everybody. So if we understand that, then we won't think that we are the persons who are, this is what the world is like about. We are the persons who are the center of everything. We're not giving anything to anybody. We didn't create anything. This is our nature. And the sooner we get that, the better, because we generally think that we are the most important person. That's really the bottom line. Every pauper is proud of his penny. Every person thinks that they are the most important. That's on its worst scenario. But we may exhibit that grossly, or we may exhibit it subtly. But that's why we're here in this world. Somehow or we've got this idea that we're godly. We may be godly, but we're not God. And that's the false sense of who we are. So that was all happening at this time as well. And Vidura himself was a great savior from that type of mentality. And so now this is called Dhṛtarāṣṭra. So he's coming back to try to reason with the fallen king to finally get him to, how would you say, regain his real nature. So this is an amazing preacher, Vidura is, because this brother of his has created such a problem in the world, such a disaster, and yet he still has affection for him and he wants to try to help him. Isn't that amazing? We know in the Christian terminology, I remember this phrase about the shepherd and the sheep, that the shepherd never always goes after the lost sheep. He never neglects the lost sheep. He actually keeps on. That's actually the example that's given for a preacher in Christianity, that never to let go of a person, whatever. You still try to help the person. I know within reason there is a certain limit, of course. The person has to be willing or interested. But Vidura saw the opportunity. The king had lost everything. He was living in the palace as almost like in an imbecilic way. He was being falsely lauded. His very enemies were the people who were putting him up, and were actually treating him wonderfully. But he was so foolish that he was still accepting it as it was something that belonged to him, not the good qualities of the other people. So I don't know if we can live up to that ideal, but this is Vidura. This is an extraordinary personality, and that's why when he was coming back after all the debacle of the Kurukshetra war, the Pandava brothers, Yudhiṣṭhira, Arjuna, and Bhima, and Nakula and Sahadeva were completely happy to see him, and they worshipped him. They worshipped him because they could see that he was a great leader. I thought in the remaining few minutes I would go to the Adi Lila, page 60-61, and to go to some amazing verses that are there. The Adi Lila, this is the very start. The whole situation's been set up by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, and he spoke 5 key verses about who Lord Chaitanya is. Our Lord Chaitanya is like our, he's our hero. He's the person that we're all following. He's Krishna incarnate. Sarvadharma Purachaya. Krishna came 1865, asked people to surrender, but he came as Lord Chaitanya, and then we didn't even have to do that. He came at a time when there was an overlapping. Paritranaya sadhanam vinishaya juskatam. Krishna comes when there is problems in the world, and he comes to set it right. It says that he comes to get rid of miscreants who are blocking his system, and to elevate the persons who are actually following his system. So Krishna enters into the world at this time. So it just so happened that this was a time in Kali Yuga, in this Manvantar, specific Manvantar, and but also Krishna was here to experience the loving separation of Radharani, and he was also wanted to show the living entities here how they could become free from this material entanglement. And so therefore by exhibiting his pastimes, God's pastimes, so that we get to understand who God is. It's not like I think the BAFTAs were given the other day, and the Oscars will be coming soon about what's the greatest movie. But this is the greatest movie. This is the real movie. This is the original movie, Krishna's pastimes. And they are so powerful that they will bring us out of the material world. That's what we're on about. That's what the Hare Krishna movement is on about. So that you hear Krishna's pastimes, because they're spiritual pastimes, you'll realize this is the reality. What I'm undergoing at present is the illusion. I want to go to the reality and get out of the illusion. I wanted to develop attraction for the reality, and I want to get unattraction for the illusion. So at the very beginning, one of the key verses is brought up. It's from 3:25-25 in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. It is Lord Kapila Deva is explaining to his mother how we can leave the material world and how to act. So this is the verse. It's 3:25-25 Bhagavatam. It is Adi Leela chapter 160. Satam pasangam mamavirya samvido bhavanti kritkarna rasayana kata the joshanas asvapavarga vartmani shataratir bhaktar anukramishati. And the translation of that is: the spiritually powerful message of Godhead can be properly discussed only in a society of devotees. And it is greatly pleasing to hear in that association. If one hears from devotees, the way of transcendental experience quickly opens up to him. And gradually he attains a taste in knowledge that in due course develops into attraction and devotion. So this is our whole process. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaram, Padasena. It means that we want to hear about God. We want to hear about his activities. And that's the great gift that's coming here in the appearance of Lord Chaitanya. He's giving it freely, what has not been given before, which is love of God. The attraction between Krishna and Radha. So this is why the devotees are always discussing this. They're not discussing the Champions League or the whatever the baseball equivalent of it is, or American football or hockey or whatever. They're not discussing these things. They're not discussing Leo Varadkar's recent episodes, or they're not discussing about Mihal. They're not discussing these things. They're just not interested. They're not even discussing about COVID. They're discussing, there's maybe place where that can be discussed, but these devotees are not discussing those things. They're discussing about Krishna's pastimes. Why? Because the way of transcendental experience quickly becomes open to them. Because then this whole spiritual thing, it becomes a reality. It's not kind of it's not some sort of material thing. It's not even that you're becoming a PhD, or you've got a new job, or you're becoming the leader of the the penguin, egg brigade, or whatever thing that you're studying. It's like, it's really to do with your own actual spiritual advancement and relation with God. That's what it's to do with. And you start to get more experience from God, not based on your abilities, but based on God's recognition of your desire, that you want to actually forget about all this stuff and you want to go back. And that has to be a very strong desire, because there's so much distraction in the world, and because that distraction is being orchestrated by an energy of God as well, which is a powerful energy. It's called Maya. And her job is to make sure that you don't leave here unless you're actually qualified, unless you're purified. So the whole system is set up very, very expertly by Krishna. He's allowing you to have some enjoyment here. Verse 3:9, Yagyartat karma nolyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. That's the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse number 9. He's set up the world that you can have some enjoyment, but it has to be done for Krishna. And we have a propensity from all our previous lifetimes in this world. So the spiritual master in Krishna tries to set up that we do things for him. Bhakti yoga, devotional service, but it's generally to do with our propensities, so that we can act kind of normally according to this particular incarnation. At the same time, we can enjoy it because that's our proclivity, but we're doing it as a service to Krishna. So at a certain time, we may be attached to the activity of the devotional service, but eventually we actually overcome that as well, and we just become attracted to Krishna. Another kind of example of that is that the spiritual master often isn't even that bothered whether it's a musical Krishna or Hare Krishna tune that somebody's singing. He's only interested in the desire, the calling, and of the particular devotee, because the other thing is like a means, but the actual essence is the love of God. Is the bhakti yoga that's there in our heart. So my problem is that I'm dry-hearted. I cannot actually spontaneously express the loving feeling that is there for God, because I'm covered over with lifetimes of crud, of karma. But at least I'm in the shower. I'm using a good deodorant, and I'm in the shower and I'm kind of getting washed. I've got very nice Dove soap. It really works. But no, I'm to be serious, I'm trying to actually clear myself of all that karma in that sense, because it's blocking me from experiencing directly love of God. Cheto darpana marjanam bhavadavinya nirvapram. That means that the words that Lord Chaitanya said, that all glories to the Sankirtan movement, which is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it cleanses the heart of all the desires that have been there for many lifetimes. It is the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it gives us the transcendental nectar for which we're always anxious. So there's a desiring in there, but that desiring person is not just desiring because I mean me, I want, I want to be happy, I want to be happy. No, it is the serving. This is the whole point of bhakti yoga. It is the serving living entity, which is actually who I am. And we're finding full satisfaction in Krishna. And the appearance of Lord Chaitanya is to give us that, is because he's explaining what it is on the platform of a devotee. The devotee wants to serve God. And it is through that act of service that one actually attains that bliss that's there. It's not that you're doing it for the bliss. You're doing it because you want to serve, because you're in love with that person. That you're in love. Think of that word that's been so much abused. I love Smarties. I love Kit Kat. I love, that word has been, devastated. But the actual meaning of bhakti is the unalloyed. It's ahaitikya pratiyata. It is unalloyed. It is and it is how would you say? It is devoid of karma and jnana. That's another story what karma and jnana is. But the karma really means you're doing something so you can get something back, and jnana means because you want to be you're doing it so you want more knowledge, so you're more knowledgeable of everything. It's a desire. But bhakti contains both of those, but it means that you're doing it for somebody else. You're doing it as a service for Krishna. So Vidura is the prime example of this. He's just an incredible living entity. And so this I'll just finish by going back on this verse again. Adi Lila, chapter 160. The spiritually powerful message of Godhead can be properly discussed only in the society of devotees, and it is greatly pleasing to hear in that association. If one hears from devotees, the way of transcendental experience quickly opens up to him, and gradually attains a taste and knowledge that in due course develops into attraction and devotion. I'm going to spend the last few minutes just talking about from Prabhupada's purport and of what he says here. This verse appears in the Srimad-Bhagavatam 3.25-25, where Kapila Dev replies to the questions of his mother Devahuti about the process of devotional service. As one advances in devotional activities, the process becomes progressively clearer and more encouraging. How? Because Krishna is revealing. As I said, clearer means getting rid of the crud that I talked about. That's gradually going. Unless one gets this spiritual encouragement by following the instructions of the spiritual master, it is not possible to make advancement. And that's why people fall away from the spiritual life, because it's hard. It appears hard. It's obviously not hard, because that's who we actually are, but it appears hard. And that's when we need to get encouragement. That's what Prabhupada's saying here. And encouragement is coming from Krishna. So how do we get that encouragement? By following the instructions of the spiritual master. It is not possible to make advancement if we don't. Therefore, one's development of a taste for executing these instructions is the test of one's devotional service. Are you getting a taste, folks? Or are you just putting on a sham, a show of devotional service? Turning up maybe at a program, or, sorry, I don't want to be putting anybody down here and putting myself down, but we have to get real. We really have to get real. That is the test. If you're getting fired up about Krishna consciousness, about devotional service, and you're doing it in an authorized way with through other shiksha gurus, people who you're accepting as as who have understood Krishna consciousness and can give you example. That's all it is. Somebody who knows a bit more than you, then if you get encouragement from those people, then you're doing okay. So let's have it for personal testing. Let's test ourselves. Are we getting that taste? That's the test. That's what Prabhupada says. One's development of a taste for executing these instructions is the test of one's devotional service. Initially, one must develop confidence by hearing the science of devotion from a qualified spiritual master. We have to accept the sadhana rules. We're explaining that this is what devotional service is. Okay, we accept it. Let's put it into practice. Then, as he associates with devotees and tries to adopt the means instructed by the spiritual master in his own life, his misgivings and other obstacles are vanquished by his execution of devotional service. And what happens then? Strong attachment for the transcendental of the service of the Lord develops as he continues listening to the messages of Godhead. And if he steadfastly proceeds in this way, he is certainly elevated to spontaneous love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's the whole, the whole shebang, the whole aspect of devotional service completely there. So, as I say, I give these classes for my benefit so that I can actually get some enthusiasm for what's going on in spiritual life. And I have to say, I do. I do get it just by hearing them from Prabhupada. When I actually get down and examine these texts and understand what they're on about, then I do get enlivened, because I understand, wow, this is a way out. This is going to happen. This is spiritual life is ever expanding. It's eternal, and I can go places with it. I actually, obviously, that's my own kind of motivation. But eventually, as I keep on saying, but I say it in a kind of a sadhana way, in that it is it's through practice by developing bhakti yoga, which is devotional service, serving Krishna, that I get away from self-serving, and that's the greatest thing there is. And these books are all explaining all about this. Chaitanya Charitamrita, you get into the whole nitty-gritty, the whole aspect of what's going on, who God is, what He's doing, why He's doing it, where we are in relation to Him, and it's that's the information, the message that we should be always hankering for, not Netflix, not BAFTAs, not football, not... Anyway, need I go on?